Welcome to Unplanned and Untold, a podcast that dives into the real life, unexpected twists of facing an unplanned pregnancy in college. Join us as we listen to the unplanned and untold stories of those who have overcome the odds in order to achieve their goals. Welcome back to another episode of Unplanned and Untold. I'm your host, Caitlin Willing, and today we have a special guest with us, Sara Morgan. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Sara's story has so many similarities to my story as far as getting pregnant, in a very unplanned manner, but then kind of going through the emotions of possible rejection from the father of your baby and finding true love after that, and then tying all the pieces together. So I'm really excited to dive into your story and to share it with our listeners. So thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
For sure. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So take me back. I know a little bit of the history where you graduated from college right around COVID. Is that right?
Yeah. So COVID hit, really around March of 2020 in our college. And I was at the University of Alabama getting my undergrad in business finance.
Okay.
And so I had about 3 months left, moved home and finished up that year. And then I lost the job that I was supposed to get after college just because of COVID. I had two kind of opportunities lined up, and I kind of figured out a way to say yes to both of them, and then
Okay.
both jobs ended up falling through. So
Wow.
I was at home living with my parents for the first time in 4 years, and I was ready to get out. So I got online, tried to figure out what can I do during a pandemic
Right.
and post college. And so I found a job in Montana as an outdoor
Wow.
guide at a luxury guest ranch. And I
Okay.
found the job, got the job, and moved out there all within 10 days. So
Oh
it
my
was like, yeah, it was a crazy adventure. And
Wow.
so I spent most of my days hiking. I did some other things like canoes and ropes course and things like that, but my main job was hiking. And so I hiked with guests every day, anywhere
Oh
from
my
2 to 14 miles.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it was so fun. It
Were
was such
you
an
always
adventure.
like outdoorsy? Is that in your blood or was this a total whip?
Yeah, I've always really liked to hike.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of always been something I like to do. I've traveled a lot, and that's like one of the things I like to do when I travel.
Wow.
But I'd never lived outside of Alabama. And so I knew I loved Montana, but it was a big, big change moving
Yes.
30 plus hours away from my family.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so that was kind of how I ended up where I was when I got pregnant, was in
And
Montana.
and you met a guy out there in Montana, is that correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, I made friends with a lot of people when I was in Montana. But yeah, the guy that became my son's biological father was a guy that I met out in Montana.
Okay, and how did that relationship kind of pull together? What did it look like?
Yeah, we were really good friends. When I moved out there, I met him like my first week there. I think like day two, he almost hit me with
Gotcha.
his truck.
I feel
Yeah,
like
in the
that's a
parking lot.
story too.
I know. But yeah, it was. Our town is really small. The town that we both lived in, it was only about 2,300 people, so it was a really small town. And so we just quickly became friends. And the people that are around your age or doing certain like similar jobs to you out
Okay.
there, doing seasonal work, you just become really close with those people. We all lived together on the ranch. We worked together on the ranch.
Wow.
We played together on the ranch after we
Yeah,
worked on the ranch. So it was just
sure.
like, it became a very fast family. So he and I just became really quick friends. He was from the South too. And um, I feel like we just had a lot in common when it came
Yeah.
to like upbringing and cultural similarities. And so that's how we ended up getting so close so quickly.
Wow. So at what point did you find out you were pregnant? Like how long had y'all been together or known each other?
Yeah, so I moved out there in July, the beginning of July. And then I was supposed to move home in the winter time. I was only supposed to go out there for like a couple months, but I really fell in love with Montana, and I really just wanted to continue living out there. So I ended up living out there longer than I thought I was going to. And both of my parents got really, really sick at the
Mm.
same time, and both of them were told by doctors that it didn't look good for either of them. So
Wow.
I'm living 30 plus hours away from my family. I feel very helpless. I feel
Sure.
very alone. You know,
Yeah.
the people that I have known realistically, I haven't known any of them for more than 4 months at this point.
Oh my gosh.
And so I just slip into a lot of depression, a lot of
Yeah.
loneliness. And so I can't really say that my story is one of love. It was really just a place of loneliness and seeking comfort in things that I weren't my norm and weren't my character
Right.
before I moved out to Montana. But I just really had no one to turn to. So I ended up partaking in some activities
As we all
that
know
led
happens
me,
on this podcast.
yes, that led me to getting pregnant.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so it was the 4 or 5 months into knowing him that all of this took place.
So at what point did you realize you were pregnant? Were you still in Montana? Were you feeling sick? Like,
Yeah,
take me back
yeah.
to that day.
Yeah, so that was pretty crazy. So my parents were getting worse, and it was
Wow.
I get yeah, my parents in December got really, really sick, and then by January, I had made the decision, like, it's time to move home. You know, both of
Mm,
my brothers were taking care of them as much as they could, but my older brother had a very real job, and my little
mm,
brother was in school, and so I was like, okay, I'm not doing anything to really help my family here, and I can't do anything from across the country. So I had made plans to move home in just a few weeks. And during that time is when I found out that I was pregnant. And that was the most terrifying day of my life. I never thought that that would ever be my story. You know, I was always the prude. I was the Christian girl that was
mm,
saving herself for marriage.
mm.
You know, like that was never, ever in my plans
Right,
of my life.
right.
And so, yeah, it was my whole world stopped in that day. I didn't know what I was going to do. I think I was in a big state of shock. I still went to work just a few hours later and just like pretended like
Nothing was going
nothing ever
on.
happened.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Because I just couldn't even comprehend how much my life was going to change in that moment. So I knew I only had a few weeks left on the ranch. And so I just kind of I I knew I was pregnant and I took care of myself as if I was pregnant, but
Mhm.
beyond that, I really didn't like think past getting home. Like I
Yep.
just was like trying
Going through the
to, yeah,
motions.
just trying to get through day to day. I didn't really
Yes.
even allow myself to process what was
Yep.
going on.
I
So
can
yeah,
so relate to that, girl. Like, it's almost like you put it in a box and you're like, "I will take care of this later." You know what I
right,
mean? And
right, right.
I remember even I was still going to the bars with our friends, not
Mhm,
drinking, but
mhm.
I acted like my life was just
Yeah,
really normal for quite some time until I was
yeah.
able to really unpack all of it.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely started, you mentioned sick. I definitely started getting really sick. I got sick really early on. I think I started throwing up at 7 weeks, and I legit did not stop throwing up until I gave birth to him.
Oh my
in
gosh.
I was in labor, like pushing him out of my body, throwing up into a barf bag. Like
Uh,
and every day in between. Like I don't think I went a day without throwing up for
Oh,
9 months. It was horrible.
so these women who are like, "I love pregnancy." You're like, "Who are
No,
you?"
I'm like, I can't relate at all. Like I there was no
Oh
part of it.
my
Now,
gosh.
I did not gain a lot of weight until the end. And so I was able to be like very active and still
Right.
live my life.
Yeah.
Which I know a lot of women are not blessed with. And so in that
Right.
aspect, but like I would just be like hanging out with my friends, go throw up and come back. Or like we'd be driving down the road and I'd be like, hey, can you pull over for like 2 seconds? And then they would let me do my thing. And then we just keep driving like nothing happened. So
Oh my
yeah, it was
gosh.
the sickness was horrible.
That's
Yeah,
wild.
that was really horrible.
There's another student mom we had on this podcast, and she got pregnant in Montana too, and she was just as sick as you. And I'm like,
Oh
maybe
no.
it's the
What is
water.
it? No, yeah.
And when I
Oh
heard
my
her tell
goodness.
me, she was sick, she literally was sick till she had that baby. And I can't comprehend how miserable that's a long time.
Yeah, it was horrible. I mean, it was months before I even gained any weight because I
Oh,
was losing weight for a little bit,
wow.
which I know is kind of normal. A lot of women lose weight in the first trimester, but
Right.
yeah, I lost a decent amount of weight in the first trimester. And then, my pregnancy was I dealt with a lot of anxiety and depression during
Mm,
my pregnancy. And so I think that probably played some into like the weight and the
absolutely.
the delay in gaining so much weight, which also causes insecurities because
Yeah.
as women, when people tell you that you're huge during your pregnancy, you get upset. But if they tell you you're small, you also get upset.
Yeah,
So,
there's no winning. I've told my
no.
husband that, "You just don't ever comment on
Yeah,
a
yeah.
woman who's pregnant. Don't comment on her looks or anything.
Yes. Yep.
Just
Yep.
say hi. I hope you're
I
feeling
don't want to
great."
hear that I'm big and I don't want to hear
No,
that I'm small.
exactly. So take me back to, how do you tell the father of your baby that you're pregnant? Is he so shocked? What did that look like for him?
Yeah, I told him right away. I don't
Oh,
know I don't know why. I know that some people, like, wait. I think, 1, he truly was my best friend out there,
right.
and one of the only people that knew how sick my parents were, and,
Yeah,
he really was who I was confiding in, and so, he was actually out of town that day, and we live in a really small town, so there's only, like, 1 store, 1
yeah,
like, there it's just really small, um so I called him and yeah, he was like 4 hours away and I called him and was just like, "You've gotta get here. Like, you've gotta get here." And I can't remember if I told him before he arrived or after he arrived. It
right.
all happened like,
It's a
it's all
blur.
kind of a blur. Um, but yeah, he was definitely in shock. There were a lot of tears from both of us.
Right.
He was really sympathetic for a few weeks. He did end up piecing out pretty quickly,
Yeah,
but I think the reality just set in on like how much life was going to have to change, and
absolutely.
um, I don't think he was quite ready for that. But
Absolutely.
I wasn't either. So
Right, right.
um,
So you end up going home because your
yeah,
parents are still very sick at this point,
yes,
and you
yes,
tell them, at that point, had you comprehended that you were gonna be doing this by yourself, that the father of your
yeah.
child he's not gonna walk alongside of you?
Yeah, so by the time I got home, I was very aware that, like, he was not in this with me,
Mm,
and telling my mom was the hardest person I had to tell.
yeah,
I my parents are angels,
yeah,
and, I see them as people who have never made a mistake and never have messed up, and I just was so, so scared to disappoint them.
yeah.
And so but I can't hide anything from my mom. I
Yeah.
also was, like, living in guilt and shame, and so
Sure.
I told her after being home for 2 days,
Okay.
and, we cried a lot, and
Mm,
I honestly, at that point, I really didn't know what I was gonna do. So when I moved home, my parents are very, you fix your own problems, you're
right,
responsible for your own self, and so I really didn't know what they were gonna do. At that point, I was kind of scared. It's so silly to say now, knowing how much they've support me, but I was so
right.
scared they were gonna kick me out. I was so
Yep,
scared they were gonna take me off insurance because I was
yep.
under 26 at the time. Like, I had plans to move in with my best friend, figure it out from there. Like,
Wow.
I did not know. And as soon as I told my mom, she was like, obviously so upset, so angry, but she was like, "How could you even have those thoughts that we were
Yeah,
gonna do that?" And
yeah,
especially now being a mom, I understand so much more the love of your child, and there's
absolutely.
such little that your child can do that's ever gonna make you feel that way. And so, having her support was literally life changing because there were definitely days where I thought, am I going to give this kid up for adoption?
Mm,
Because I can't afford him and because I can't care for him. And again, those thoughts now seem so silly, but at the time
right.
they were so real in my mind. Um, my dad was, mentally sick as well.
Okay.
His sickness was causing a lot of, brain issues, and
Mm.
so his mind was very, very childlike at the time, so I actually didn't tell him for 2 months of living at home.
You held
Um,
that in for 2
yeah.
months. Wow.
He didn't know for 2 months, and, yeah, he didn't notice that I was throwing up, and, we can laugh about it now, but it
Yeah.
was it was kinda crazy. I'm like, "How do you not see that your daughter is so sick?" But he
Yeah.
was battling his own stuff, and I definitely don't blame him at all, and, at the time that I told him, we still didn't even know if he was gonna see my son and,
Right.
live to see him, and I truly think that, my pregnancy and me giving birth and living with them really gave him a lot of purpose and a lot of will to
Wow.
live, and so I do think
Wow.
that, my son had a big part in saving my dad's life, and so,
which
Telling them was really hard.
the timing of everything, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
It's just it's wild to even hear you
Yeah,
say that because
yes.
let's just say you weren't pregnant. Like, we don't know what the outcome would have been, but the fact that you
Mhm.
were, it does give him something to hold on to
Right,
see his grandson
right.
and, to play that role as a grandfather.
Exactly,
How
exactly, and
beautiful.
especially with not having a male figure when he was born, I think it was really special
Oh,
that my dad got to live with him for a period of time, and I have 2 awesome brothers, and so they kind of played that role too as well, and so, he was never without, a male figure in his life, but
yes.
yeah, I think that they have a very unique relationship because of that.
I love that. Now,
Yeah.
take me back to being pregnant, knowing that you're going to be doing it on your own.
Mhm.
Where does your mind go? Do you feel like you're going to be a single mom your whole life? Like what were you thinking at that moment?
Yeah, a lot more people were worried for me than I was.
Mm,
Honestly, I was like, love and future husband, like, it really wasn't even crossing my mind. It wasn't like, "Oh, I'll figure it out later," or "I'm gonna be single forever." It just there were so many other things I needed to worry about, but
yeah.
so many people thought they needed to encourage me, to let me know that the right man would come along.
Yeah. And you're like, I'm not even worried about men right now. I want nothing to do with them.
I just was so like, it wasn't even on my brain,
Right.
and
Right.
so many people my sweet father loved to encourage me with that. He would tell me, "The right man's not gonna care," and it was so sweet, and it was so encouraging, but I just was like, "I'm worried about giving
Yes.
birth to a human and taking care of this
Absolutely.
human." I
Yes.
was very, very protective of my child even when I was pregnant, and so it was just really all I thought about, a lot. Now, as I was moving home, one of the job offers that I originally thought I was gonna have right after college, with my church reached out to me and,
Okay.
wanted to hire me.
Okay.
They did not know that I was pregnant, and
Okay.
that was another really hard conversation to have of,
Right.
"Hey, I'm about to be a single mom, and, I can't come work full time because I don't even know how I'm gonna have to take care of my child."
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
so that was a really, really heartbreaking conversation to have because suddenly I was in a situation of, "How am I even gonna work? How am I even
Mhm.
gonna take care of my child?"
Yeah.
There were a lot of unknowns, and so I spent a lot of my pregnancy, struggling with that.
Yes, yes, and at some point, you come at home for the gender reveal or somebody throws you a gender reveal party.
Yes.
Who take me
Yeah,
to that.
so okay, so I've been home for a couple of months now, because I found out, very, very early on that I was pregnant, and so
Okay,
I had been home for a few months, and my best friend Kayla wanted to throw me a gender reveal. And at this point, I was still, like, very depressed, and it was honestly one of the first things that made me excited about
yes.
pregnancy. So she lived in Savannah, Georgia, which was about 7 hours from me, and so
Okay,
I was like, "Okay, I'll come down there. I'll drive down and, you can throw this for me." So she, sets this whole thing up, and her and her husband are gonna throw it, and it's just gonna be us 3, and, she had some friends come over and set it up for, some of her husband's
oh,
friends, and so one of them was Ray, who is now my husband, and so, she had him set it up, and he asked, "Can I stay for the party?"
right.
And she said, "No, like, Sarah, it's really private, like, you can't stay," and so, um Kayla and her husband and I got to have, like, that special time
Oh,
together. I FaceTimed in a few other of my friends that I
okay.
just wanted to experience it with me, but I wasn't really ready to have, like, a full party with a lot
Why
of people.
why do you think that is? What made you shy away from that, the typical gender
Uh,
reveal?
I don't know. I think I was just then starting to, like, be happy
Mm,
again, and I think that a lot of people were gonna stress me out, and I didn't wanna have to have the same I didn't know what that was gonna look like, and I I
okay.
I didn't wanna get locked into having all these different kinds of conversations that I wasn't ready to have yet,
Mhm.
but I knew a FaceTime could be quick, and I could celebrate with them, and then it'd be over, so,
Right.
I hadn't, like, announced on social media yet or anything like that, but I had a group of friends that I had individually told,
Okay.
and so I kinda gathered them all together and put them on a group FaceTime and
Sweet.
bit into a cupcake and all the
Oh.
things, but so it was really fun. It was just a lot more intimate and, was perfect for my situation, and my friend is so thoughtful for thinking of that and doing that for me. But,
That's really
so I didn't meet Ray that day.
okay.
Um, but the next day, a big group of us go to the beach, and I don't know anyone there besides my friend Kayla, who I'm staying with. And so she said, "Oh, just so you know, like that's the guy that set up your balloon arch for you." Sorry.
You're right.
So I just go up to him and thank him. And I was like, "Oh, by the way, it's a boy." And in that moment, I realized like it was the first guy I had even told that I was having a boy.
Oh my gosh.
And so yeah, we hit it off right away. We just had great conversation, but he had a girlfriend of 5 years, and I just knew that from Kayla, and I
Right.
was very anti any kind of relationship at
Yep.
that point anyways. But I did we just had really great conversation all day. And so um before I left Savannah, I made some jokes to Kayla and her husband that, I was interested in him if he ever did become single, but I knew the likelihood was so small. Like he was in a very long-term relationship. Well, I did not know that that relationship was about to end, and
Wow.
yeah, so it was really cool, just like the Lord's work and timing of everything. But yeah, so he reached out to me a few weeks later. He got a little tip from from Kayla that I might be interested. And so we texted for a few months, and he had 2 days off from the army come July. So I'm like 7 months pregnant at this point. He hasn't even seen me since I looked pregnant, because when I was
Right.
at the beach with them, like I didn't even look pregnant or anything. Um, but he said sorry, I missed a crucial part.
You're
They're in
fine.
the army together.
Okay.
That's how Kayla, her husband and him
And
know
Ray
each
know
other
each
very,
other.
yeah.
That makes sense. Yep.
Yes. So he had 2 days off from the army, and he was like, "Can I drive up and take you on a date?" And I said no. I was working a conference. I was volunteering at a conference that I
Okay.
was it was like 14-hour days, and I
Wow.
was exhausted. I was 7 months pregnant. Um, so I said no. Well, my phone stopped working for 5 hours randomly, just stops working. And by the time it starts working again, I have a text from him that's like, "Great. Well, I am going to drive overnight, and I'll take you to coffee in the morning before the conference starts."
So he's
So,
interested. He's like,
yes,
I'm coming. I'm coming whether or not
yes.
you're ready.
Yeah. So he drove a 14-hour round trip for
Oh
a
my
30-minute coffee
word.
date. And I was like, "Okay, this is either really sweet or really creepy."
We're like
And
weighing it out.
I don't know which one.
Oh my
Um, so
word.
yeah, so that was our first date, and he just didn't treat me any different. Like, it was kind of weird at the beginning navigating like how much is he going to ask me? How much do I even want to share?
Sure.
And at that point I really still didn't even know if I was ready to date or wanted to date. And
Right.
so we just were very casual for a while, casual dates. And he lived very far away. He was getting out of the army and moving back to his home, which was in South Dakota. So really, I didn't even know what that looked like, and he was so low on my priorities at that point.
Yes.
I was like, my baby is like my whole world right now.
Yes.
Um, so he ended up, I had very strict boundaries and walls at the time. And so, I always said Beckham's going to have one dad. And,
Right.
that if that's not you, then we're not going to pretend like it is,
Exactly.
for,
Yep.
for a period of time.
You knew what you
Um,
wanted.
Yes. So he
Mhm.
was not invited to the birth or anything like that, wasn't invited to the hospital, because that was 3 months after our first date. And so
Okay.
to me, this is still very casual. And
Ew.
so,
Yeah.
however, he was coming to visit me the week before my due date.
Yeah.
And I go into labor as he is headed to the airport.
Oh my god.
So he's texting me, and he's like, "Should I even come?" And I'm like, "I don't care.
I
I'm
don't.
going into
I'm about to
labor.
have a baby, buddy.
Like, I don't care what you do. Come, don't come.
Wow.
It is so not, I don't care."
Yeah.
So he ends up coming,
Oh
and he
my god.
stayed at a friend's house for like
Okay.
3 days until I could get out of the hospital. And
Oh my
so he did
gosh.
get to come over and see Beckham when he was only 2 days old. And now that
Wow.
is really special that we like have those photos and have those memories. Because he only came over for a few hours, just like anyone else that I was having over at the time, friends
Right.
or other family
Sure.
came over. got to hold him, but it really didn't go beyond that. But
Right.
now it's really special that we have those memories of him
Absolutely.
only being a couple days old and Ray getting to hold him.
Oh my word. So how does your relationship change now that you have a newborn baby and he's met this newborn baby?
Yeah,
And like,
yeah.
it's just funny because neither one of you were pushing this relationship along, but
Mhm.
things have happened like,
Right.
you know, in
Yeah.
impeccable timing, even for him to be a part of your baby shower or your gender reveal without you even
Right.
knowing. He's like a
Right,
part of
right,
that.
right.
And now he somewhat is like a part of those first moments
Yeah,
after your
yeah,
son is born. So how does the relationship continue to move forward?
yeah. So, let me think. Oh, he actually broke up with me. He ended things, because
What happened?
so we went from me being pregnant with no job and no school. So I worked 3 jobs while I was pregnant to save up as much as I
Wow.
could. But the last, like, month, I ended all of my jobs just so I could, like, really prep for, baby, and I'd
Right.
really saved up enough where I could kinda do that. I was living with my parents, and
Wow.
so thankfully, I was blessed where I could just take a month and really just allow myself to get ready to have a baby.
Right.
Um but in that time, I spent a lot of my time on the phone with Ray, and so he was used to 4-hour FaceTimes and
Yes.
all my attention on him, and he had just gotten out of the Army, and he's, older at this point for a freshman in college, but he's still living a freshman
Right.
college life,
Yep.
and so he has a lot of free time that he's bored, he wants to talk to me, and
Yes.
suddenly I have a baby that requires all my attention.
Absolutely.
So, it goes from 4 hours a day to, like, maybe 4 texts a day, and life really changed, or the
Yes.
dynamic between us really changed. So he ended up saying, I don't think I want to do this. And it was a really sad day for me.
Yeah.
We weren't dating at this point, like I said, it was still very casual. It wasn't official or anything.
Right.
But it was still very sad of, I thought that this could be something and then it wasn't. And I think it just kind of foreshadowed like some concerns for the future. Like, is this always going to be what this is like?
Right.
Um, but that only lasted a few weeks.
He's like, "Wait,
Yep.
I really do love her."
Yes, he, came to Alabama for a wedding that we were both in,
Okay.
and it was actually the Kayla and Connor, the couple that introduced us, they weren't married yet, and so this was their wedding.
Wow.
So they really played a lot
Full
of
circle. They're
yeah.
involved. They're
Yes,
invested.
they really are, they really are. So, we were both in their wedding, and, so he did not get a hotel with all the other boys. He
Right.
got the hotel that was right next to my house, which we all thought was a
Oh,
little interesting,
curious.
considering he didn't wanna be a part of this anymore.
Right, right.
But he was like, "Yeah, she's just my ride to the wedding," and all of
Mhm.
that. We did not spend a moment apart the entire weekend, and by the end of the weekend, he was like, "Yeah, we're doing this." So, that kind
Wow.
of solidified everything moving forward.
Wow.
We still did not play house, we didn't he wasn't Beckham's dad,
Right.
um, at the time,
Yep.
we really had some strict boundaries on what this was, but then a year later, he proposed at the same conference that I was working when he
Oh
came to take
my
me on my date,
gosh. Wow.
um, and
Now
then we got married this past May.
oh,
Yes, thank
congratulations.
you, thank you.
Now you say, you didn't play house, there were strict boundaries.
Yeah.
Walk me through why. Like, what was the mentality behind that?
Yeah, kind of like I was saying earlier, of like, I only wanted Beckham to have one dad, and I
Right.
didn't want, even though Beckham can't remember right now, I was going through therapy through all of this, and I
Sure.
kept saying, "Oh, I want to protect Beckham, and I want to protect Beckham," and my therapist was like, "That's really great, but let's be real. You want to protect yourself, and that is okay, and that's good,
Right.
but let's call it what it is." And so
Yeah.
I think I never wanted to have the memories of multiple dads playing house with multiple people.
Yeah.
And so I think it was really more for myself than Beckham. Beckham is a baby. He's not going to remember any of this. But I think that that was a big reason in my mind.
Absolutely. And I can definitely understand that because I felt the exact same thing when my husband, and I go through all of my details in podcast number 2, episode number 2, so I won't go into everything. But when my husband came into the picture and wanted to help, like my now husband, he's not the
Mhm.
biological father of my
Right.
son.
Right.
I like wouldn't let him. And everyone thought that was so weird, but I was like, listen, I'm still dealing with being rejected by the father of my child. Like, I'm working through those emotions. And the last thing I want is another guy to come into the picture who's not 100% in and can bounce at any moment. And here I
Mhm.
am. I've allowed you come into my life. I've allowed you to take some of this pressure off of me. Like, it's just better if I do it myself.
Mhm.
Did you have any feelings like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely a big part of it as well was, I had seen another guy have the privilege and opportunity to bounce whenever he wanted.
Right.
And he had a lot more stake in the game than Ray did.
Exactly.
And so I
Exactly.
knew that that was a reality was Ray could leave at any point and
Right.
then I'd be alone again and I'd be doing this all by myself again.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was pride as well. I struggled a lot with being a single mom and taking that to a little bit of an extreme.
Hmm.
I wouldn't accept help really from my family a lot. Um, I really, all the bottles and the late nights and everything, I had a lot of offers and I didn't accept nearly as much as I,
Yeah.
looking back, should have.
Right.
Next baby, if there is a next baby,
Yes.
I will definitely take that help. The pride is gone.
Yes, yes. And some of that I found was guilt on my part too of like I did this, like this is
Yes.
what I have to deal with
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I don't deserve the help. Was working through all of that
Absolutely.
so hard. But when that second baby comes, you take all that help because it's hard.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how when you look back at it now, I'm like, how did we do this by
I know.
ourselves?
I
How
know.
were we the sole take it like the sole person taking care of an infant who's up every few hours needing changing
Absolutely.
and feeding and all the things, but you kind of pull up your bootstraps and you do it.
Yeah, I always say it really is just survival mode
Mhm.
because I couldn't do that now. I couldn't with no newborn. I couldn't just be up every 2 hours in the night for no reason. But there's
Right.
just something ingrained in moms where
Yeah.
suddenly when you have to and you
Yes.
have to take care of another human being,
Yes.
your body just figures out a way to do it.
You figure it out one way or another. That's
Yeah.
wild. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So I love to ask this question to everybody. And I don't know if you're a listener, but you may know this question is coming. But what advice would you give to a girl who's experiencing an unplanned pregnancy right now? I mean, she could be in college, she could be like you, just graduated, and
Yeah.
her ducks aren't in a row yet. And this is just totally unplanned and rocking her world. What do you say to her?
Yeah. So when I moved home, a guy that had recently moved out to California to work at a church out there reached out to me and said, "First, I want to tell you that I'm so proud of you."
Mm.
And it just like it even brings me to tears right now.
Yes.
It's because it meant so much to me because I think people just assume that you have to do this now that you're pregnant. And
Mhm.
we live in a world where there are a ton of different options
Yep.
on what you can do when you find out
Yep.
that you're pregnant. And
Mhm.
whether or not I agree with them, the reality is those options are out there.
Right.
And so to have someone, especially living in the South and in Alabama, to have someone tell me, I recognize that you took the brave route and I'm really
Mhm.
proud of you,
Yes.
meant a lot to me. And so any girl that has come to me since, because the door has been open to a lot of
Yes.
women that have been in similar situations that I've got to talk to, is I tell them I'm really proud of you because
Mm.
it is really hard to take that step. Um, and then my piece of advice that I would give is to seek help and to ask for help. That was something that I really struggled with a lot, like we just talked about with pride and seeing it almost as a punishment. And now I have to take
Mhm.
responsibility,
Yeah.
which was not the case at all, but that was how
Awesome.
you feel in those moments. And
Yeah.
so it's okay to ask for help. And that
Mhm.
doesn't make you weak and it doesn't make you any less of a mom. It makes you strong and brave and courageous to be able to even ask for that help.
Absolutely. And I'm so proud of you for being so transparent with your whole
Well, thank
story
you.
and seeing how it all came together. I think that's the beauty of these podcasts is in those first moments of finding out you're pregnant, you can't see what's down the road in the future. And I know when you
Absolutely.
found out you're pregnant in Montana, you wouldn't even have thought that you'd be living the life that you are now, and it's beautiful, and we can
Mhm.
see how it's been beautifully orchestrated and woven together, and it's really awesome that you're able to share this with all of our listeners and hopefully give some hope to somebody who really needs it in the moment of finding out, "I'm pregnant, now what?"
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on,
absolutely. Thank
sharing.
you for having me. This has been so
Yes,
fun.
absolutely, and to all of our listeners, we hope to have you back for our next episode of Unplanned and Untold. Bye-bye. Do you want to be a part of an organization that is the first of its kind to empower student moms? Your support can impact generations to come. Consider making a financial contribution at babysteps.org.